Hello, this short lecture is on constructive feedback and criticism, and it's part of the How to Succeed as a Student series of videos. The first thing I'd like you to do is just pause the video and write down what is feedback for. So go ahead and pause the video now. Okay, so we're going to continue. The purpose of this video is to help you understand the purpose of feedback. It's also to help you learn how to use feedback constructively to improve your future work, to identify what makes feedback and constructive criticism useful, and finally to ensure that you have a positive attitude towards receiving and interpreting the feedback that you're given in your studies. Why do we want to do these things? Well, feedback is an incredibly valuable resource to help you improve your work as you progress. And if you've watched some of the other videos in this series, you might notice there's a common theme here, which is that students who read and act on feedback tend to do better in their assignments. So using feedback well helps you to direct your own learning priorities and to do the kind of personal and professional development that we talked about in another video. And understanding what makes good academic feedback helps you to communicate better in general. So the purpose of feedback then. Receiving and using feedback really is a crucial part of your learning. It helps you to understand when you're doing well, and it helps to identify the things that you can do better. There's a little terminology issue here. So feedback is looking towards the past. It gives you information about where you are in relation to the learning goals of the course or the program that you're on. And this helps you to evaluate your own progress and to look at gaps in your learning or misconceptions, things that you've perhaps got wrong, with the view to helping you take action to correct these errors. Feed forward is equally or perhaps more important in a learner's progress. Feedback looks towards the past, whereas feed forward looks towards the future. So this is where you'll find constructive guidance on how you can improve. So this is a way, receiving feedback is a way of ensuring that the assessments you do play a role in improving your learning throughout your whole learning journey. But this is reliant on you, the student, using the feedback that you're given in an effective way. And just to say that I'm going to use the word feedback for both feedback and feed forward, as most people do. So when I say feedback, it means both things. So good feedback then. Good feedback will provide you with information about your learning. And this information will help you to assess your learning. It will also help you to reflect on what you've already learned and your development. It also gives you a framework for discussing your learning with tutors, for addressing issues, or for pinpointing particular things that could have been done very well or might have been done better. Feedback also helps you to understand the expectations of your course, what defines good performance in relation to the learning outcomes of the program that you're on. It gives you the opportunity to improve and progress. And feedback can also really motivate you and encourage you to think positively. Oh, well, I didn't do so well on that this time, but that's something that I know how to fix for next time. Feedback also, importantly, gives teachers information that they can use to help improve and shape their teaching, either for the future within your class or for future learners. What feedback is not? So feedback is not disapproval. It's not criticism, although it can include elements of criticism, and it's not a personal attack. Feedback is provided for the sole purpose of helping you improve your work. Feedback is also not a justification for a grade. Sometimes there seems to be a mismatch in a student's eyes between the grade they've been given and the feedback that that's attached to that grade. But you should not see feedback as a justification for a grade. Your tutor will have focused in the feedback on the things that they think will help you the most, the things that can help you in your learning journey. So it gives you an insight into things that were successfully covered and improvements for the future. But it's not expected to be a comprehensive coverage of everything that made up your grade. And that leads us to our next what feedback is not, which is comprehensive. It's highly selective feedback. It tends to be concentrated on the most important areas and the most actionable things that you can do. Feedback is very much not the end of a process. And if you only remember one thing from this video, please let it be this. If you read your feedback and then ignore it, you are giving up a very, very valuable resource, which will help you in your learning journey. So if you get feedback that's a couple of months after you've submitted a piece of work, you might think, oh, why do I care about this? I've finished that piece of work. I don't need to go back to it. That feedback is still incredibly valuable to you. It's a snapshot of your progress at that point in time, and it's really worth your while looking at that feedback and using it as part of your ongoing development. How can you use this resource to make sure that your next assignment is even better? So let's have a brief talk about what makes feedback useful. So feedback should be timely. The more immediate it is, the more helpful it will be generally. Feedback should be descriptive, not judgmental. And this means it should be very accurate and very clear. It should describe the work that was submitted in a non-judgmental way. And ideally, feedback should be highly specific, using concrete examples from the work that you've handed in. And it should also match explicitly to the assessment criteria for the assessment in question. So a really good piece of feedback will quote in some way an aspect of the work that you've submitted and use that to either say, well done, you've achieved that really well, you're in line with where you should be on this course, or it will say, here's something you could have done better. You're halfway to this assessment criteria, but you're not quite there yet. Good feedback is always actionable. And by this, I simply mean that it's clear what you need to do to improve on a piece of negative feedback. Feedback should be fair and reasonable, so it should be evidenced, again using preferably concrete examples from the work submitted. And most feedback has positive as well as negative elements. It should show where you have met learning objectives, and this can offer a comparison for the learning objectives that perhaps you haven't quite met or could do better at. Feedback absolutely should be dependent on what you did, not who you are. If you receive feedback which is focused on you as a person, that is very bad feedback. And the feedback should be comparative only to the assessment criteria for that assignment, not to other students. So in a different video in this series, I mentioned that assessment is not competitive. Not only 10% of students can get A's. That's not how grading works. So if you meet the assessment criteria for that topic, it doesn't matter if every other student on the course also did, you will get the grade that you deserve. So your feedback should reflect this, and it should be comparing you to the criteria for that assessment as an individual. It should never compare you to how well or how badly other students did. So let's turn now to how you can use feedback. And again, a little bit of terminology. The word criticism arrives from making judgments. It has positive connotations as well as negative. To be critical means to have good, informed judgment. And of course, as you know, it can also be used to mean expressing a dislike or a rejection of something. But in an academic context, criticism or a crit genuinely means that people are passing judgment. Now, feedback reflects this. Your feedback is likely to include criticism, and it may have negative criticism as part of that, but criticism doesn't always mean that it has to be negative. All feedback you receive, even if it is negative, is very, very useful if you use it correctly. So you can use it to find out what, if anything, you did wrong or could have done better, to identify anything you missed out that you should have included based on the assignment brief, and to help you think about how you can improve for the future. So you might need different types of feedback at different stages of your work. So it's good practice to think about what kind of feedback you would actually like before you hand your work in and ask your tutor for it. If there's one element of the work that you know you really struggled with, ask your tutor to concentrate on that in their feedback. Did I manage to do this? Was I just being paranoid? Or could I still improve in this area? Your tutors are very experienced at giving you the feedback that they think would be the most helpful, but you're the one that knows yourself and knows the bits that you found most difficult. So don't hide it, don't try and obscure it. Ask for the kind of help that you think would be the most beneficial to you. And there's just some examples here. If you're worried about referencing, ask for feedback on an early draft. If you're struggling with one particular element of your practice, ask the tutor to concentrate on that in their feedback. And if you're unsure if an essay makes sense, for instance, ask a peer, a student on your course, to have a quick read of it before you submit it. You can use all of these kinds of feedback to really inform your learning. Try to identify the strengths and weaknesses of your work yourself. Usually, if you've just handed in a piece of work, you may feel like you never want to see it again. But it could be very good and very beneficial for you if you just have a look at it a week later and you note down what you think you did well and what you think you didn't do so well at based on the assessment criteria. And as you build up a kind of portfolio of feedback as you progress through your course, look back at early feedback and look at the kind of things that you found really helpful, the kind of comments that really helped you to engage with the learning, and think about how they've helped you and can you apply this lesson to other comments that you've got in feedback. So always think about how you can use it. To throw away feedback, to never act on it, is to waste one of the most crucially valuable parts of your contact with your tutors that you're going to get at university. And if possible, it's not always possible, but if possible, you can always ask a tutor to have a look at a brief draft, just to give their impressions very briefly on an early submission of the work. This also has the advantage of helping you manage your time and making sure that you don't do everything the day before the submission deadline. So that's how to react to feedback. Here's some examples of how not to react to feedback. So, how you shouldn't react to feedback. All the feedback you get is made in good faith by your tutors, and where it's directly supported by evidence from your work, it's incredibly valuable. So your tutor is giving you the tools that you need to improve your work, but you do need to then take responsibility for using the tools that you've been given. So don't ignore it. Don't be defensive if there's something that's a bit negative in there. Don't overreact to criticism to try and kind of make it seem unreasonable or negate it. Take it in the spirit in which it's intended. Okay, actually, I could have done a bit better at that. I could have put a bit more work in there. Don't assume that your tutor is being hostile. It's very easy to misinterpret the written word, as I'm sure all of us know. So make sure that you engage with the feedback with a positive attitude and treat it in the way that it's intended, which is to help you. This is important. Don't assume that just by reading the feedback, the improvements will then magically happen all by themselves. This just isn't the case. When you get feedback, it requires you to actively interpret it and then take action in the areas identified. Don't deny praise. If somebody said you've done really well at something, acknowledge it. Say, yes, I did a great job of that. How can I take that forward? How can I make sure that I succeed just as well in future? And don't rationalize feedback in a way that dissolves any personal responsibility. In terms of, oh, well, I didn't do so well on that piece of work, but I was quite tired that week. Or, well, that's not my fault. It's because the other person in my group was really getting on my nerves. Make sure that when you get feedback, you really look at what you could have done differently or what you will do in future to make sure that your work improves. So once again, let's answer this question. What is feedback for? And if there's one single answer that I could give to this, it's that feedback is to help you. So make sure you use it well. Here's some practical steps. Make sure that you read feedback closely, read it actively. And this could involve you sketching out in bullet points or just underlining bits, the key points that were made in the feedback. As you get more feedback as you move along throughout a course, you might be able to synthesize it and identify that some issues keep reoccurring. If this happens, make those your learning priority. Make sure that you focus your professional and personal development goals on the areas that keep appearing in feedback as actionable things to improve. Do identify the places where you can get additional help. One example of this could be that you might need additional support for English language skills. So identify where you can get help and then pursue that help. So here's some further resources. This is a little bit old, but quite a good book on making the most of your time at university, and it's quite a practically focused guide. There are many other books like it out there if you can't get access to this one. And here's the link that I based some of the feedback and feed forward guidelines on. Once again, thanks for listening. I hope this was really useful.